G'day guys, JB here. The end of the 2021-2022 NBA regular season has occurred. We're finally through all 82 games for each and every squad. Now it's time to reflect, have a look back on each team. We'll go from the worst record to the best record in the league. We'll talk about who I think will be the end of season award winners, my all-NBA teams, my all-defensive teams as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start with my Rockets. Yes, it's going to surprise some people. I actually have a team in the league, and it is unfortunately at this stage of the game the Houston Rockets. The Rockets finished with the worst record in the NBA with a 20-62 record. For me, their best player all year was Christian Wood. Christian Wood, in my opinion, responsible as the best player in 9 of the team's 20 wins. Eric Gordon played pretty well, all things considered, as a vet, with 4 wins there. And Jalen Green, the other standout player there, with 2 wins to his name. Again, many people will go off win shares. Many people will go of contributing box score, plus minus, all that sort of stuff. For me, I go through every team's win, and I vote the best player in a winning side. Again, I help compile that towards my All-NBA, towards my MVP voting, etc. Next, we have the Orlando Magic, who finished with a very paltry 22-60 record, and they were dead last in the Eastern Conference. For me, standout player was Karl-Anthony with 6 wins. Also had Franz Wagner and Mo Bamba, I should say, with 3 wins each. And you had your stays there of a Terrence Ross, who's pretty much the last remaining original Orlando member. Again, a really bottomed out year, but there is some upside again to Orlando, a couple of upsides as well to Houston, but the problem is they're at least 20 plus games off a 500 record, and you can see them certainly looking to just simply farm their pieces into better organisations and franchises. Next up, we have Detroit. Detroit, 53-9 record on the season, which saw them finish with the 14th best record in the East. For me, pretty clear cut. Saddiq Bey, I think their best player all year. I had 8 wins credited to him. I also had 4 to Jeremy Grant, but Cade Cunningham is going to go very close to Rookie of the Year with 4 as well. There are plenty of upsides to Detroit. Again, Saddiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, Cade Cunningham, I think they're guys that could play key roles on good teams, but the issue is, again, same with Orlando, same with Houston. You're very likely to see these guys simply develop as players and then move on to other teams as well. Sure, they might get a bag with the team and might put some numbers up with these guys, but at the end of the day, if they're going to want that resume-defining win, that championship and those playoff runs, they're going to need to go elsewhere at this stage. Next up, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who were 24-58 on the season, finishing 14th in the West. And I thought clear-cut the best player all season was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 13 wins for me for Shai. I thought he had a massive contribution there. When you look at the percentage of wins accounted for, right up there with some of the best players in the league. Lou Dort had some solid games throughout the season as well, and Josh Giddey had a terrific rookie season as well. Again, plenty of upside for the OKC Thunder. Only 2 years ago did we see them making a good playoff appearance, particularly with some veteran experience of Chris Paul. They're young, they've got draft picks. Unfortunately for OKC, I don't see them doing much more in the meantime. They still have a fair bit to work through, but plenty of upside, plenty of draft picks. They can actually build a side and a core. It's just going to take some time, and I would suggest that we're still a good 3 to 5 years off them being a genuine playoff contender and a team that can really make some noise. They might make a trade move, they might gather some pieces, but I feel that, again, there's sort of a development farm at the moment. Next up, we have the Indiana Pacers, 13th in the East this year with a 25-57 record. A team that essentially blew it up, had some pieces, and really not much of a change to a side that made a close playoff run last year and the year before. Traded away Sabonis, gained Halliburton, and that was essentially the big move for that team. 25-57, as I mentioned. Still feel Sabonis was probably their best player all year, despite being traded before the deadline. Had him responsible for 10 of their 25 wins. Caris LeVert came along nicely in patches. Miles Turner had a down year. Malcolm Brogdon, down year. Halliburton came in and made an impact where he could, but simply not the same team that we've seen from Indiana over the last couple of seasons. They're going to need to rebuild. Rick Carlisle going in fresh into that team. It'll be interesting to see what they can pull out there. We then move over to Portland, 27-55. They were 13th in the West. They had some standout performances on a positive side from a CJ McCollum, who had 7 wins to his name. Damian Lillard, a very down year, had 7 wins to his name. Did not play much or more, certainly any effective basketball for the Blazers. Anthony Simons coming along there, 6 wins. Jusuf Nurkic trying to bump back up to form. But it's amazing to see where Portland have gone in the last couple of years. You look at someone like a Robert Covington. You look at someone like a Gary Trent Jr., who was with that team as well. This was a side that a few years ago was genuinely wanting to push towards the Western Conference Finals and has really bottomed out. They're going to need to do a bit. Chauncey Billups with his first season on the team there. But CJ McCollum, probably their best player, even in the limited games he played for them, with 7 wins. D. Lillard, a lot of questions and crossroads there, particularly after an off-season, debating whether they're going to build around him or trade him. It's going to be very interesting. I did predict that Portland would be blown up by the All-Star break, and they were. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Moving on to Sacramento. Again, the big trade there with Halliburton and Sabonis to go into things there. They finished 12th in the West with a 30-52 record. And I think De'Aaron Fox was their best player. I have him down for 14 wins, responsible for on the season. Harrison Barnes with 5, Tyrese Halliburton still with 3 himself. Davion Mitchell and Damian Jones, the other multiple winners there. But again, Sacramento really simply just struggling. They don't attract many good players to great players. They don't seem to be able to hold coaches consistently. They've only ever appeared in the playoffs with Rick Adelman. It's a real big question for the franchise. Again, they're stuck with the fact that there's the Battle of LA. You've now got a successful Phoenix side. You also have the prominent Warriors as well. Sacramento, a genuine afterthought in a really deep market there in California. So they really need to start making some moves. They need to start shaking. De'Aaron Fox, 14 wins. Again, he debuted. His debut season, he was certainly a potential playoff. Not a potential playoff, a potential all-star. And he has shown spades with that as well. But it is interesting just to see who they've bailed with. And I don't know whether you're going to be able to combine De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis and Buddy Hield all on the one team. But then again, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Just don't think this team has a really genuine ball handler, which is why I thought Halliburton and Sabonis probably would have worked better. However, that is not the case. Moving on to the Lakers. Again, probably the most underwhelming effort by a team that stacked resume-wise in team history. Finished 33-49, 11th in the West, missed the play-in, and that's consisting with some of the most with arguably the most decorated roster of all time. Surprise, surprise, I've got LeBron James responsible for 20 wins on this team, 20 of a possible 33. Anthony Davis with 7 in the limited games he played, 2 to Russell Westbrook and 2 to Carmelo Anthony. Really not much more to say other than the fact that they've severely underperformed in the full seasons that they've had. They have either missed the playoffs. In the 82-game seasons LeBron's been there, they have missed the playoffs. They win a championship in the bubble, and then they bounce out in the first round on limited scheduling last year. Age, a factor. Injuries, a factor. Chemistry, a factor. Disharmony, a factor. The Lakers are genuinely a rabble. With some bad contracts over the next 12 months, you would probably see the Lakers maybe break 500 with health. But I think chemistry is going to be key here. They might surprise me. They might do really, really well. And again, I can't doubt a team with such a deep resume as theirs. However, it's really not looking that great, everything considered. And LeBron's last year in LA could very well be forgetful if, in fact, he does play that final year in LA. Moving on over to San Antonio, a team that very limited in stocks but has had some great upside. They are in the play-in as well, which is a bonus. They are 10th, finishing a game ahead of the Lakers, 34-48. And when you compare rosters, it's a real question as to what was really going on in LA. Dejounte Murray, the absolute standout there, should have been will be a borderline All-NBA selection. Didn't quite make it for me, but 19 of a possible 34 wins for Dejounte Murray for me. Only the second player ever to average at least 20 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals in a season. Michael Jordan, the other guy, had 32, 8 and 8 with those 2 steals. Keldon Johnson had 6 wins to his name, in my opinion, as well. Multiples to Derek White and Devin Vassell as well. Dejounte Murray is going to be an all-defensive guard as well, I dare suggest. He's had a really good breakout season, and I think when you've got a guard such as Murray, you can probably shoulder a little bit more offense on him, but get some pieces around him. It's clear that this San Antonio side, when they're able to develop and play well, can go places. So it'd be interesting to see how they go in the play-in. I'm not going to rate them overly highly. Again, you don't get a 10th seed with a record that is, 34 and 48. That's a long way behind 500, but we will see what happens from there. Good to see Dejounte Murray being rewarded for what has been a good season, and certainly one that has appeared to fly under the radar. We then move over to Washington, who finished 35 and 47, which is quite ironic that they finished 12th in the East. They're not even in the play-in, and someone like San Antonio, 34 wins, is in a play-in. A lot of rejects in this team, for lack of a better term, and all seem to be somewhat producing at the Wizards when they got there. Kyle Kuzma, for me, the best Wizards player this year with 9 wins. I had 7 for the limited games Bradley Beal played. I had 6 for Montrezl Harrell. Also had 4 to Spencer Dinwiddie. Kristaps Porzingis, reasonably strong after the trade with them, 4 wins and multiples to KCP. Again, I wasn't expecting much out of them, but it's good to see a bunch of people who were certainly deemed not useful, who were certainly deemed wasteful, and were essentially discarded for a loaded roster, still managed to pull 2 more wins together. Kyle Kuzma showing that he can play. Montrezl Harrell, another 6-man candidate, and it's going to be interesting to see where Porzingis fits in for the rest of this team, particularly moving forward, and how Spencer Dinwiddie plays along there. But, if you've got Dinwiddie, you could realistically have a 4 out of 5, or certainly a starting 5 of a Porzingis, a Dinwiddie, a Beal, a Kuzma, and a Caldwell Pope. You've also got your Rui Hachimura, I should say, Daniel Gafford. You could have Harrell off the bench as well. So not a bad side, and as I said earlier in the year, when the chips are down for everyone else, they're usually looking pretty strong, but very competitive Eastern Conference this year, one of the more competitive Eastern Conferences we've seen for some time. Moving on, once again, we head back over to the Western Conference and over to New Orleans. 36 and 46 record. They're 9th in the West to end the season. They're in the play-in tournament. And Brandon Ingram with another solid year. I had him with 18 of 36 wins for this team. CJ McCollum, 13 total wins for his season, 7 with the Blazers. I had him with 6 with New Orleans. Jonas Valanciunas with 6 and a multiple to Devontae Graham. Again, New Orleans with no Zion Williamson. Some real questions with the trade talk. Getting rid of Josh Hart essentially is their key loss there for CJ McCollum. Josh Hart had a reasonable game, I do know, in his trade over to Portland. But it'll be interesting to see. New Orleans with Zion are probably a playoff team, probably still a bubble, probably still a play-in team, but certainly more likely a playoff team. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with his contract, what they do with him, how he recovers. But I really think that, Ingram and McCollum really suit one another. I think you could get some players around them. Again, you're looking at a lower-seeded Western Conference team there, but, achieving and doing what they need to do, which is great to see. Brandon Ingram, again, another guy who was simply discarded from LA, has put together a couple of really solid seasons, probably 3 consistently solid seasons right now, really living up to that contract. He's going to want to take the next step and really push for All-NBA selection as soon as he can. And moving over to New York, only one column along in the alphabet. 37-45, 11th in the East. They dropped out of the playoffs. They were a 4th seed last year and 11th seed this year. I had Julius Randle with 12 wins on the season. I'd have to argue, though, that RJ Barrett's certainly probably their most valuable player all season. You had 5 to Alec Burks as well, and I also had multiples to Fournier, Quickly, Toppin, Robinson, and Kemba Walker, another one to Derrick Rose, who always seems to get some love. But New York, it's going to be really interesting what they do. There's clearly an attitude issue. There's probably some rotational issues in the coaching department, but there's some strong upside. There's some really talented young basketballers there. Quickly, Toppin, Robinson, and Barrett are clearly going to be the lead of that team. What Kemba Walker does moving forward, I don't know. Derrick Rose, I think you need to keep that veteran there. I'd probably a good reason to keep Kemba Walker as well, but if you want to make a really big push with New York, you need to get some genuine senior championship experience. Get it around these young guys. Understand the young guys are going to develop Again, you can have the Garden rocking, but a genuine subpar year considering they were a 4th seed last year. Randall with a massive improvement last year. He took a step back this year. The Knicks took a step back. I don't think that's any coincidence. Moving on to the 500 teams now, and we will start with the LA Clippers, who despite their injury woes, no Kawhi Leonard all season, essentially half the season out for Paul George. Some players really stepped up for the Clippers, and they finished with a 42-40 record and the 8th seed in the West. Surprisingly, I still had Paul George responsible for more wins on this team than anyone else. I had 14 to him. Reggie Jackson was big in his absence. I gave 8 to him, 5 to Marcus Morris, 4 to Amir Coffey, and multiples to Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, and Eric Bledsoe. You also had some good individual contributions as well. But the Clippers, a team that just put up, shut up, and despite having the disadvantages they did, managed to really get going, really secure themselves, and had a nice timely return of Paul George. Questions surrounding Kawhi. Do you bring a guy back straight into playoff basketball off a 12-month injury such as an ACL? Probably not, but if you do feel you can get a good matchup in the first round, regardless of who you're going to face, I mean, they're going to be fighting for a 7th seed. Realistically, it's going to be interesting to see what they can do, and I really think that if they can get a favourable matchup, again, I wouldn't want to be facing the Clippers. They are a decent team. I think they've showed this once again. But they just simply can't get a stroke of luck for everything to go their way. They make a big run last year, and Kawhi goes down with an ACL. They managed to get no chemistry out of themselves as a team the year before, and they get beat in the bubble after a 3-1 lead. Not an excuse at all, but you shouldn't go up 3-1 and choke away the last 3 games of your series. So again, another interesting year for the Clippers, but again, you're going to make 3 straight playoff runs. You made a Western Conference final last year. It's not a championship, but I think it's reasonably compatible considering the 4 years LeBron has been in LA. Bubble championship, proving a bit of an anomaly. Got bounced essentially after a 2-0 lead against Phoenix, got bounced and have missed the playoffs twice. So I think the Clippers can, depending on whatever way you're measuring that, I think you can be really positive as to how they've been and certainly where they may end up next year. Moving over to Charlotte. Charlotte finished with a 43-39 record. They really utilised their young talent around the team to be able to get a playoff berth. Charlotte, of course, the 10th seed in the East, so that should give you an idea. 43-39, a nice balance of competition there. I had 12 wins to LaMelo Ball, 11 wins to Miles Bridges, 10 to Terry Rozier, 7 to Kelly Oubre Jr., and I had a multiple there to Gordon Hayward as well. It's been a fantastic year if you are a Charlotte Hornets fan. Scary Terry showed his face. Kelly Oubre with big minutes off the bench. I don't think Gordon Hayward's ever been the same since that broken leg, but he keeps trying to put in, but he's also recognising the development of Rozier, Bridges and Ball. They're not going to be an easy beat by any means in the playoffs. I think they're a first-round team at worst. At best, I think they're a first-round team, but Miles Bridges taking nice big steps, Terry Rozier fitting into the rotations where he needed to, and LaMelo Ball continues to show where he's going. For a team like this to be making the playoffs, to have a couple of veterans around, and to see the development of these young guys, that's a big tick in the box, and I'd be looking for them to be pushing that 46-47 win mark next year if everything goes the right way. But it is a very deep Eastern Conference right now, and I think credit to Charlotte for what they're doing. Next up, we have Atlanta. They're the 9th seed in the East, and they finished with a 43-39 record. No surprise that I've got Trae Young as their best player. 34 wins by my calculation can be credited to Trae Young, 34 or 43. Very nice feather in the cap. He had a massive year as well. The second player in league history to lead the league in both total points and total assists in the 1 year, behind Tiny Archibald in 1972-73. Obviously, the big difference with Archibald is that he also won scoring and assist titles, but it's quite interesting to note when you look at a game-by-game, when you look at a head-to-head comparison of those seasons, Tiny played 4 more games and managed 1,000 more minutes. It's an unfathomable amount of minutes, but that just tells you how well they played. Per 36 actually suit Trae Young, but when you account for free throws and three-point attempts, it does start to make a bit of sense, as well as the way that assists are judged these days. But I had multiples to Clint Capella, John Collins and Bogdanovic. I think a healthy Collins this season changes things as well. You're probably looking at a 50-win team, and Trae Young probably getting a bit more respect. Personally, I got no issues if you got Trae Young certainly high up in not necessarily your MVP vote. I mean, you're talking about a team and a guy who's, I don't think you can have him in top 5 in your MVP, but you lead the league in total points and total assists. You get that team, despite its many fallings, particularly with inconsistencies of Capella and Collins not being there, you get them up at 43 wins. You're producing yourself. There's a lot going into it. I think you're looking at a guy who's certainly going to get a high All-NBA nod. Who can Atlanta take down? Well, that's the question. Do you really see them taking down the Heat? And do you see them taking down the Celtics or the Bucks? Not really. It'll be interesting to see how they go there. I'm very intrigued to see how Trae Young would take on a Marcus Smart in the first round matchup, or even potentially a Jimmy Butler. Would be quite interesting to watch. Moving across the board, once again, we will go to the Cleveland Cavaliers, another young team who stood up and played some great basketball this year. 44-38, 8th in the Eastern Conference. And Darius Garland, for me, leading the way, 19 wins to his name. I had 10 to Jared Allen, 5 to Kevin Love, 3 to Evan Mobley, who's going to be right up there in Rookie of the Year voting too, and another 2 to Ricky Rubio, who, despite being out, was then replaced by Rajon Rondo in what was one of the smartest trades of the mid-season point. 44-38, 8th in the East. Again, this is a team I don't think many people had tickets on at all. They managed to get 2 All-Stars out of it. And I think Darius Garland certainly earns a fair nod to be All-NBA third-team contention as well. Again, do I think Cleveland are going to be able to upset your Celtics? Do I think they're going to be able to upset the likes of a Miami? Probably not, because I do think that teams like the Bucks are probably still favoured to come out of the East, but it's certainly good to see Cleveland playing well without LeBron. Their first 500 year without LeBron since 1998. And I do believe that was the year of Terrell Brand and Sean Kemp. They were rated one of, if not the best defensive team in the league. But a nice mix of young talent as well. Colin Sexton not in this lineup for most of the year, either with an injury, but it's great to see them playing some good basketball. Moving on, we go to Brooklyn, who finished 44-38 in the year as well. They managed to gather themselves the 7th seed on head-to-head, and no surprises here. I had Kevin Durant as the best player on this team, 23 of the possible 44 wins. James Harden played well when he was with the team, but again, he bailed out, had 14 total wins, and you could certainly make a case that CJ McCollum had equal, if not a better season than him. Kyrie Irving in his limited games with 6 as well. Obviously, the Brooklyn Big Three, where they could, stepping up, had singles to Seth Curry and Cam Thomas. But they're going to be a very, very interesting matchup. The 7th seed there, they've got some favourable matchups heading into the play-in tournament, and it's going to be very hard to guard 2 of the, arguably, well, certainly one of the 5 best players in the world, but 2 of the 10, 2 of the 15 best players in the world on the same page. Playing every game in the playoffs is going to be very, very interesting. I think the only gripe will be if they somehow, and I don't think it's actually possible until the second round, if they somehow manage a matchup with Toronto, that could be interesting regarding Kyrie Irving and his status over in Canada as far as playing games. But Brooklyn aren't necessarily the worst 7th seed I've ever seen. They're certainly not one to doubt. And when you've got Kevin Durant, one of the 5 best players in the world, when he's healthy at that team, they're going to be very, very hard to stop. Moving along from Brooklyn, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who finished with a nice collective 46-36 record and managed to get themselves into a nice position of 7th in the West. Karl-Anthony Towns, the best player for them, and I think he's earned an All-NBA nod this year. 25 of possible 46 wins to him. Anthony Edwards, another breakout season, once again off his rookie year. Both him and LaMelo Ball making steps, and I think he actually had a better, more consistent sophomore year. D'Angelo Russell with 6 and individuals and doubles along the way to Noel. Jalen Noel, Malik Beasley, and Taurean Prince. 46-36, it's one of the it's the first non-Kevin Garnett Minnesota team to crack 500, I do believe, and to make a decent playoff run. Karl-Anthony Towns with a career year. Obviously, he had the highlight of the All-Star game, but I really think he's taken a step. Greatest shooting big man ever, big stretch for me. But I do think that he is the leader of this team, certainly the best player on this team, and I think the All-NBA selection for me, and as you'll see later, he's the All-NBA third centre for me, one of the 3 best centres in the league. What Minnesota do in the playoffs, I don't know, but when you consider that they're going to be facing Memphis or they're going to be facing Phoenix, you know, they've got a tough task going up against Malik B, going up against Mikal Bridges, and going up against Jaren Jackson Jr. That's going to be a big defensive ask. Big battle there for Karl-Anthony Towns, so we'll see what goes forward. The guards are going to get a fair challenge as well, and the perimeter is going to be interesting. But Minnesota, 46 wins, 7th in the West. A nice positive season for them, and it'll be interesting to see where they grow and whether in turn Karl-Anthony Towns has truly turned the corner to make the step that he needs to make. Then going back to Chicago finished 6th in the East, 46-36 record. DeMar DeRozan, the clear leader of that club there. 24 of a possible 46 wins can be accredited to him, in my opinion. Zach LaVine with 12, and I had a couple of wins there for Nikola Vucevic as well, singles to White, Williams, and Lonzo Ball. Chicago honestly were hurt by Caruso and Lonzo Ball's injuries. I think they would be a far better team, and certainly a far better team when they're on the floor. They'd be a far better seeded team if those gentlemen had stayed on the floor, and I think the complexion of the league looks a lot different when arguably the best defensive tandem on the perimeter plays together. So it'll be interesting to see how healthy we can get them, whether they're going to be playing together in the playoffs, just how that's looking. But Chicago, plenty of positive signs, certainly moving forward. A 6-seed matchup going against Milwaukee. I don't think they've got anyone that can contain Giannis, and I think he's the biggest outlier, certainly in the year two. I don't know who's going to be able to match up with him on either end of the floor for the Bulls, and he's certainly going to run roughshod, I do feel, across most of the league in the playoffs. But Chicago, a nice season, a good outlook of what is to come for this team. I wouldn't necessarily expect great things out of them this season, but certainly in the next 2 to 3 years, they will need to capitalise on what they've got at hand. Moving over to Denver, 48-34, 6th in the West. And it's just death and taxes as to who is the best player on this Nuggets side. It's clearly Nikola Jokic, and it is preemptive, and there were a lot of great players that played for Denver, but we're looking at a guy who's potentially, and in my opinion, should be a back-to-back MVP, finishing 3 games off his other 2 leading contenders for that award while playing with far less help, and certainly noted help on his team. I think you're looking at the MVP of the league, a 2-time MVP of the league. Probably the greatest Nugget of all time. It's hard to really fathom that, but to put 2 back-to-back MVP years together, to be healthy throughout, a credit to him. 48-34, 6th in the West. I think that's completely over. That's a massive overachievement for the Denver Nuggets when you consider everything that team has lost, hasn't got, and is struggling to get back. Massive, massive effort. Again, multiples to Will Barton, Campazzo, Highland, and Cousins. But yeah, Nikola Jokic is dominating the league, dominating for Denver, and with all the questions that are being asked of him, he still manages to answer them, and while you don't always have to agree with the answers, he's still providing them, and providing them in spades. So full credit to Denver there. Now, again, the whole question is, as the 6th seed, you're taking on the 3rd seed in the West, which is going to be the Warriors. Do they have enough to stop the firepower of the perimeter of the Warriors? I don't know, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see Draymond Green have to battle with Nikola Jokic in this first round. And I think if Jokic gets the better of them and you don't have a healthy Steph Curry, you could have a genuine worry. But I think the Warriors do have plenty of other bases covered through your Jordan Pooles and Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins as well. Moving on from Denver, we have the Toronto Raptors, who are another surprise packet this year. They've had a really positive season once again, coming off a bit of a bad year last year and certainly a couple of quiet years after the bubble as well. But Toronto, I had them 48-34, 5th in the East, and Pascal Siakam, even though Fred VanVleet started well, got the All-NBA nod, and is probably going to be very close to the all-defensive team. I think Gary Trent Jr. probably just gets him there. Pascal Siakam, for me, the best player for the Raptors this year, and the fact that he's played more games, the fact he qualifies for everything, accounts for more wins, he's probably going to be one of my All-NBA third-team forwards. He's had a consistent run, 3 out of 4 years essentially, as an All-NBA third-team level player, one of the 6 to 10 best forwards, certainly one of the 6 best forwards in the league, and one would argue one of the 15 best players in the league. He's still looking for that breakout season, which he did try to do after Kawhi Leonard left in 1920. Again, shut down with a bubble and didn't quite have the connections he needed. But Fred VanVleet, another standout, I believe just the second guy ever to go from the G League to an All-Star, the D-League, G League, to go to the All-Star game. A massive season for him. Gary Trent Jr., again, just another guy who I think Portland wasted away. proven commodity, proven talent. I thought he probably gets a nod on the all-defensive team. Fred VanVleet up there as well. Scotty Barnes, who I probably have as Rookie of the Year, had a major contributing factor in a starting lineup for a Toronto team that's played really well. And Ananobi with a single there. But plenty of good things to like about the Raptors. And it's going to be interesting to see how they go playing in the East. Obviously taking on the 4th seed Philadelphia. Joel Embiid, a massive question mark there, but they're only 3 games behind Embiid, who is teaming up with a guy who's a perennial playoff choker, and he himself hasn't always greatly delivered. It's going to be really interesting to see just how these teams match up. Plenty of length for the Raptors as well, and plenty of guts, grit, and determination. They probably also have a matchup factor advantage when you go interstate with them, or when you travel to Canada to play them. And Matisse Thybulle not playing for Philadelphia in the away games there in Toronto, so another big factor as well. But the Raptors sitting really nicely there at the 5th seed now. How they managed to compete going up against either the Bucks, the Celtics and the Heat, completely different kettle of fish. But I do think they have the firepower, considering the weaknesses of Philadelphia, to certainly not struggle and potentially get a win there. Moving on over, we have the 49-win Utah Jazz. And Utah, of course, this year were one of only a few teams projected to win 50 games. They fell short by one of that, but their 2 leading causes still headed up the attack. Donovan Mitchell, for me, I thought he was their best player all year. 24 of a possible 49 wins. Rudy Gobert with 10 wins there. I don't think he was one of the 3 best centres in the league, but he probably still gets the nod as the all-defensive centre there. Another solid year for him. Donovan Mitchell, I've said it before and I'll say it again, if he was in a small market team or he's on an East Coast team playing well, or just in a big market in general, people would rant and rave about Donovan Mitchell, his athleticism, his ability to score the basketball. People forget he had a really, really nice playoff run last year. People seem to forget about that and just focus on the negatives of Gobert. But, Donovan Mitchell's a bowler. Whether he stays around to hang around in New York, who knows? But again, that will all be dependent on the way the team plays in the playoffs. 4th seed in the West is going to be an interesting matchup. Going up against the 4th seed in the West is going to be an interesting matchup for them. Of course, they will be taking on the Dallas Mavericks, who certainly have their own issues injury-wise at the moment, which may be a big key as well for someone like Utah. But again, they're a side that really needs to get on their bike and ride till they see a genuine Western Conference berth. It's going to be hard to make a fair judge of them. Collapsing 3-1 leads, losing out to the Clippers without Kawhi. A lot of questions that need to be answered there for the Utah Jazz. I had Bojan Bogdanovic with 7 wins, Clarkson with 4 and singles to Rudy Gay, Juan Hernan Gomez, Trent Forster and Jared Butler. But again, Donovan Mitchell, probably played his way into an All-NBA 3rd team for my liking as well. We then moved to Milwaukee, one of the favourites, if not the favourite, to come out of the Eastern Conference. And surprise, surprise, I had Giannis with 36 of a possible 51 wins this year. This is a guy who's going to have a top 2 scoring year, potentially a top 3 MVP year, and potentially a top 3 Defensive Player of the Year season. Only one other guy has more than one of those seasons, and that's Jordan. So again, that's top 3 in scoring, MVP, and Defensive Player of the Year. Jordan did it 3 times. Giannis set to do it twice. And it has a genuine case, in my opinion, if you really, really wanted to put him right up there in the MVP conversation. No real major advantage or disadvantage. If you do have him, great. If you don't, no big deal. But he certainly had an MVP level season, which is something that both Jokic and Embiid can also hang their hat on, the fact that they had those elite level seasons. I had Drew Holiday with 7 wins, Chris Middleton with 4 wins, 2 to Pat Connaughton and singles to Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez. But it is nice to see that the Bucks are again trending well. Top 3 finish in the East, potentially back-to-back finals, and if Giannis was to magically pull that out in the finals as well, I think we're talking about the 2nd greatest power forward outright of all time. Moving on from the Milwaukee Bucks, we had the Philadelphia 76ers. They finished 4th in the East, and I had Joel Embiid, 38 of 51 wins for the team. I had 7 to Tyrese Maxey, he'll be a sleeper for the most improved award. Seth Curry with doubles, but I had singles to Harris Reed, Tobias Harris, Paul Reed, James Harden and Andre Drummond. The real question is going to be, do they stand up and perform in the playoffs? Where does Maxey and Harris battle in that fold? Where does Seth Curry fit in that mould? Where do you balance your bigs as well in that team? Is Joel Embiid finally going to take the next step? Is James Harden finally going to concede and look after himself as a second option to appease his teammates? Is Embiid nothing but a flat-track bully? Is he someone that wants to run out in front but doesn't want to chase hard from behind? Who knows? We will find out. I think Joel Embiid, again, he's going to win he wins the scoring title, but he's had that MVP caliber season as well if he gets voted at grade. He's had a solid defensive year as well. I think you can make a case for him being all-defensive second team. I certainly couldn't look at him in the first team, but he's had another solid year in MVP level campaign. Philadelphia should be happy. Again, sitting on that fourth seed, so they're going to have to take on Toronto, who seem to have some good matchups with them. How well they match up is another question. And again, can they deliver in the playoffs? It is the ultimate question being asked of Philadelphia right now. Moving over to Boston, 51-32 for them as well. They managed to secure the second seed. And no surprise here, Jason Tatum, the best player for this team. A genuine all-NBA first-team contender. 30 of a possible 51 wins. Tatum went into his bag this year and really took that next step. You know, everyone's like, oh, he's only 19. Been saying that forever. But this is the year Tatum needed to step up, and it was a massive post-All-Star game step up for him as well, which was awesome to see. It's exactly what we wanted. It's exactly what we've asked for, and he's starting to deliver. He's broken himself clear of Jaylen Brown, who is a very nice sidekick, and thankfully they've started to actually look at that Boston squad with their coaches, with their front office, and realise that, okay, we don't need to split these guys up. We have Marcus Smart, who's a great defensive point. We've got Jaylen Brown, who's a good off-scoring option. Jason Tatum, a lead scoring option. Some solid defensive bigs in Robert Williams, in Al Horford. You still managed to get some good play out of Dennis Schroeder as well during the year. Josh Richardson, I had 2 wins for him as well. But the challenge for Boston now is they're going to be taking on the Brooklyn Nets. It is a massive ask defensively of Boston, who were arguably, when you account for points per game allowed and you also account for their defensive rating, they're arguably the best defensive team in the league. First in opposing points per game, second in defensive rating. You know, you name a team doing that well. And they're a genuine championship contender. I think they've got the defensive player, potentially the defensive player of the year, or one or two candidates in Smart and Williams on the team. You're talking about a potential All-NBA first teamer in Jason Tatum. This is a stud-ridden team and a team ready to make that move. But again, we've got to see them deliver in the playoffs. At times we have struggled to see them perform in the playoffs, and while many people are going to point back to 2018 when they made an improbable conference finals run without a Kyrie Irving and a Gordon Hayward, you do need to look at some recency and their efforts recency in the playoffs, and one would have to suggest that they have underperformed when that has come around. But hopefully they've turned a new leaf, hopefully they've turned the corner, turned the page, and Jason Tatum taking that big step will be able to lead them going forward. Next on my list is the Dallas Mavericks, who at 52-30 had Luka Doncic leading the way, 35 of the 52 there. I think there's a little too much harshness on a Jalen Brunson, who had a really nice season for me. I had 10 wins for him. Kristaps Porzingis, I had 5 for him, 9 overall on the season, including the 4 in Washington. I had a couple to Spencer Dinwiddie as well before he was traded. But the ultimate question right now that hangs over Luka Doncic and the Mavs is the fact that he left the last game of the season with a calf complaint and was seen leaving the hospital in a moon boot later the very next day. So a lot of questions there. Will Luka be fit? What can they do without him? Fourth in the West means they're going to be taking on the 5th seed Utah Jazz, and I just think that Dallas would struggle going up against a 5th seed Utah without Luka. It doesn't have a playoff series win to his name, so he's going to want to really make up for that, and I can attest the fact that he's one of the best players in the league. But it's going to be a lot of work for Dallas from here, particularly if Luka is currently in a moon boot and is being treated essentially day to day, knowing that he's got a game only a few days' time to really balance things out, and get moving. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But Dallas 52-30, and I think Luka made a solid All-NBA push as well. Golden State, no surprises there. They had a really strong start to the season. At one point, I believe, with 9-1 or 10-1, they've managed to flounder away a little bit there. 53-29 in the West. They will take on the 6th seed Denver Nuggets with Nikola Jokic. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to the performance of Draymond Green defensively, of Klay Thompson to probably lead the offense, with Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins. You've also got Kevon Looney on that team, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to stop Nikola Jokic, because Jokic has proven that he can get some serious dubs with teams despite how good or great they are. But Golden State, had a nice solid start to the year. I had Steph Curry as their best player, 28 wins for him. I had 10 to Jordan Poole, 7 to the late returning Klay Thompson, 4 to Jordan Kuminga, who's also big as well for them, and 4 to Andrew Wiggins. But I don't think the fate of the Warriors is if Steph plays in the first round. I think the fate of the Warriors comes if they get to the second round and they don't have any Steph, because there are plenty of other things as well that they can work through. Steph, All-NBA season, certainly not a Steph Curry level season. When you set the bar so high as he did, it's very hard for you to ever try and match it. But again, he's had a nice season. I think he's All-NBA second team level. Was a guy who was tracking in most of the MVP conversations for the better part, in my opinion at least, for half the season, and has played reasonably well. Let's hope that injury is okay for him. But 53-29, we will see where the Warriors can get. Second round exit may be a thing, but certainly a side that is in the playoffs, and a side you can't doubt just because of their pure firepower that they have. Moving on now to Miami. Miami finished top of the Eastern Conference with a 53-29 record. This one was also one to toss and turn over as to who the most important player was, but ultimately Jimmy Butler for me responsible for 18 wins. Genuine nod to Tyler Hero with 16 wins and some solid contributions from Bam Adebayo, who I think gets an all-defensive nod of some level this year. But I would have to say that there is a fair chance that Miami don't have an All-NBA nod amongst them. I do feel that there have been players who have won more games for their sides, and Jimmy Butler just not hitting the 20-win mark there. But Tyler Hero, very invaluable, probably the most certain six-man of the year that I've seen in quite some time, arguably in my lifetime. Bam Adebayo has finally started to step up, and I think the big key thing for this Heat team, again, you had contributions from Gabe Vincent, Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, Max Truss, Victor Oladipo had a reasonable game in there, Dwayne Dedman, Caleb Martin as well. But Miami were predicted, and were reasonably predicted as well, to be a side 2 or 3 years ago that would be competing at this stage they are now. They had a very nice bubble run, then an early playoff exit the following year, and now they're back to where they need to be. They've got some other key veteran moves there, veterans as well. And while those veterans probably aren't putting in minutes, it's having those veterans around those young guys to harness them, to make them realise the challenge, the expectations of what it needs to be. Now, do I think Miami's the favourite to come out of the East? Absolutely not. I think that you will see Milwaukee come out. But if Milwaukee were to take on Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals, I certainly wouldn't be shocked. I think that's a matchup that could very well go ahead. And I think Toronto, when you're weighing it up, it might just be the fact that everyone's like, they may choke again Philadelphia. But, if you saw Miami, Toronto, if you saw Toronto, Milwaukee, Miami at the end of the year, or the business end of the Eastern Conference, I wouldn't be shocked. But, yeah, there are some questions. They still managed, after everything that happened, to go to the top of the pops in the East. Jimmy Butler's all about winning. He's continued to prove he's all about winning. While he's certainly not the best player in the league, you can make a case he's a top 20 player in the league, I think, at this point. We're talking about a guy who gets in and just wants to win, and wants to win wherever and however he can, and he's not afraid to tell who, what, when, where, why, and how about getting it done. Again, 53-29, I think this is where many people expected Miami to be at this stage of the game, but after that early peak, many expected a bit of a bigger run. Second best team in the league this year has been the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't think that's even been a question about who one of the better young teams, and probably the most well-coached team. I think Taylor Jenkins is probably coach of the year, but Ja Morant, 25 wins to his name, one of 10 players for me this season who had 25 wins under his belt. I think he makes All-NBA second team. I think he's the most improved player, or arguably the most improved player in the league. We're talking about a guy who stepped up into that upper echelon, genuine top 10 player in the league category this year. He was very well supported though. Desmond Bane with a nice season, 16 wins as well to him. Dylan Brooks contributing where he can. Tyus Jones contributing where he can. And Jaren Jackson Jr., one of the lead defensive guys, and, raw numbers and ability, and just what he brought to this team, the most durable Grizzly there is. People have to remember the average age of Memphis right now is around 23 years old. I'm 26. It's insane to think how long this Memphis team, if they can hold it together, if players can sacrifice, if there's no infighting, and everyone can step up and stay healthy, Memphis could be a very genuine contender over the next 3 years. And it's going to be scary because the ceiling for a lot of these guys hasn't been reached and is still a fair way off as well. 56-26, they need to get Ja back. I don't think they go very, very deep as a playoff team without Ja, but, you know, this is a side who, again, there's no reason I can't see them in the Western Conference Finals, playing next to the Phoenix Suns, who I'll talk about in a second. But Memphis, a side that's really grown. They've improved by 18 wins this year. You know, they're one of the 4 best defensive teams in the league. They're consistently got young guys performing. They're a top 4, top 5 defense in the league. Plenty to like about Memphis, plenty of upside, and certainly the most promising and exciting team. And it certainly has been a year for promising and exciting teams. I mean, you look over on the other side of the conference, you've got Cleveland, you've got Charlotte, and you've got Toronto. Young teams, exciting teams, growing teams who have all hit 500 this year and are really getting things done. And again, as no surprise, top of the pops this year, the only team to break 60 wins when many teams weren't predicted to win more than 55, and a lot of outlets were saying this would be a season without a 60-win team. The Phoenix Suns with a 64-18 record, an all-time record, 64-18. The MVP of that team, no doubt about it, Devin Booker. I had 33 wins on the books for him, no pun intended. I also had Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton sharing the load at 11 wins each there as well. And I think Phoenix have done what I thought they could do, and that's prove that they were not a fluke finals team last year. Now, were there some favourable matchups last year for them? Absolutely, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, you still have to get there. I think the one thing that has, you know, solidified them, and I mentioned this to friends as well, the thing that has solidified Phoenix is the fact that they aren't, you know, a side that, you know, if they can get back there again and they prove it's not a fluke, well, you don't win 64 games by fluke, and you don't do it when Chris Paul misses 6 to 8 weeks. As much as I might despise how Chris Paul seemed to front run last year, it is fair enough to suggest that Phoenix, you know, were certainly a decent team, a team that could deliver. They had plenty of other help along the way as well. Let's not just sugarcoat over the 3 guys here. You had nice contributions from Cam Johnson. You had Mikal Bridges, who is one of the leading Defensive Player of the Year candidates, certainly one of the leading defenders in the league. You had JaVale McGee contributing as well, Frank Kaminsky, Cam Payne as well, playing really nicely along the way there. But you don't win 64 games by fluke. You don't set an all-time franchise record by fluke. This is what happens, you know, again, a lot of this is stemming from that massive run in the bubble, that sense of belief where finally people looked at Devin Booker and went, damn, this guy can actually play. Well, Devin Booker's always been able to play. It's a matter of being able to have some support around him. And he's finally got that support. He's finally getting the recognition he deserves. You know, this is a guy who was an All-NBA first-team selection for me this year. We'll get to them in a second. Phoenix, 64-18. I do expect them to come out of the West. I do probably expect to see a Milwaukee Suns replay in the finals. The question is there anyone that is going to be able to contribute to looking after Giannis? If they can do that, we might see a Suns championship. We will see. But Phoenix, certainly the best team in the league this year by a street, finishing 8 games clear of the rest of the pack and the only 60-win team on the season. Now, let's get into the league awards. I've hinted to most of them throughout this video. But my MVP, Nikola Jokic, it's really simple. Delivered as a superstar. You know, won 48 games with less help than his other 2 leading combatants for the MVP in Embiid and Jokic. Finished 3 games behind them despite the fact that he essentially went the entire season without Jamal Murray and without Michael Porter Jr. Didn't play with anywhere near the rosters that everyone else above him has had. And even though they go, oh, well, he's a 6th seed and he's barely missed the play, well, that's fair enough. But when you also consider the fact that 3 games difference without playing anywhere near someone like a Tyrese Maxey this year, without playing near anyone such as a James Harden, without playing near anyone such as a Drew Holiday, and even to the consistency levels of a Chris Middleton, you do have to factor a lot of this in. He's the only guy for me that was responsible for 40 wins this season. I have no qualms in saying that Nikola Jokic is the MVP, and if he wins a first round battle against the Warriors, I mean, it's very hard to argue against. I mean, we're talking not to the level of a Kobe Bryant 05-06, but I mean, if the Lakers made the second round in 05-06, very hard to argue against Kobe being that MVP. Very, very hard to argue. If Steph Curry's playing on this team as well in this first round and the Nuggets get through them, I have absolutely no qualms or arguments against Jokic as the MVP. I think he is the MVP, but you'd certainly have no argument for me against him. Essentially did more with less, and only just finished short of everyone with more, again, with less. Did the heavy lifting, needs those shoulders strapped, all that stuff. Defensive Player of the Year, I've gone with Jaren Jackson Jr. He's been the most durable. When you look at his raw numbers, he's producing. When you look at his advanced numbers, he's producing. To me, it's not even really a close call. He's helped anchor Memphis to a top 4 seed, top 4 defensive team. He's helped them anchor to the second best record in the league. Again, a big factor as to why they're 20-2 without Ja Morant is pure and simple the fact that, Jaren Jackson Jr. is in that squad. You know, hard for and against. Marcus Smart's a real close one, but then when you consider the fact that in their 7 losses, they were only realistically down 1 point across all the board. In the 2-1, in the 3 games he missed after they went on their massive run after the All-Star break, they were still ahead for and against. The fact that Robert Williams III and Al Horford have been massive contributing factors as well. Mikal Bridges being massive with Jay Crowder as well, but you've got to remember Chris Paul still had some contributing factor. Obviously missed a lot of games, but there was a very solid offense there as well. A lot of arguments for and against, but I mean, to give you some perspective, people will argue Rudy Gobert over Jaren Jackson, despite the fact that in the 12-game difference, which is in favour of Jaren Jackson. So if Gobert played 12 more games in order just to catch Jaren Jackson Jr. statistically, he would need to average 2.3 steals and 3.3 blocks. That is a massive, massive difference in 12 games. I think it was 40 blocks and 28 steals, a massive difference for those guys competing against one another. You know, again, a massive, massive season for him. Raw numbers, anchoring a good defense. Okay, they were, essentially 3-1 without him, but again, he's the most durable. He's anchored them to one of the best defenses in the league. He's a big contributing factor. For me, Jaren Jackson Jr., Defensive Player of the Year. For me, Rookie of the Year, Scotty Barnes. Cade Cunningham has a massive case as well, but I just think that Scotty Barnes, played a more pivotal role in a more successful team. And again, people will argue, well, he had Siakam, he had Van Fleet. Yeah, that's fair enough as well. But when I looked at players in their first year who were the reason for wins, I could contribute 4 wins directly to Scotty Barnes. They were a more successful team, and he's going to prove pivotal in playoff matchups. Evan Mobley, another guy who was very close as well. I just had that one more win to Scotty Barnes. Again, I don't think you could go wrong if you pick any of those 3 guys. I think your next 2 were obviously your Jalen Greens and your Josh Giddys. But, yeah, for me, I had Scotty Barnes, and I think he's going to be crucial in what could be a very exciting first-round matchup and what could be a pivotal playoff run for Toronto. And again, Evan Mobley, it's going to be really interesting to see where he sits as well. 6th Man of the Year, Tyler Hero. Moving on, the most unanimous 6th Man of the Year, arguably, in my life. It just won't even be close. Most improved, again, Ja Morant. Now, there's a lot of guys who, they jump from, top 20 to top 15. Not really that great of a jump, or, they're on the fringe and then they're, an elite level player. We're talking about a guy who genuinely cemented himself in the MVP conversation. I think he's one of the 10 best players in the league this season. I think he's going to have a case as an All-NBA second-team player. And I cannot name any other player who has showed the dramatic level of improvement Ja has that is to that elite level in the competition. Miles Bridges, another guy who's going to be very, very close. Jordan Poole, another guy who had a very sensational year as well. But for me, Ja took such an enormous step at the level he's been playing at, and for what he's going to be a factor of moving forward, I don't even think it's close. Ja Morant, most improved. And in turn, Coach of the Year, it is a 2-horse race, and I think Taylor Jenkins, even though they're the 2nd seed, I think Taylor Jenkins will get it. This is a Memphis side that is beyond young. I mean, again, turning 26 myself this year. Average age of that grew is 23. They improved 18 wins this season. They were 20-2 without their superstar, top 10 player in the league guy, anchoring to a top 4 defense as young as they are. Realistically, Steven Adams is the big vet of that team, and they are just absolutely killing it. If Monty Williams wins it, no argument. Again, it's like if Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley win Rookie of the Year, no argument there. If Marcus Smart or, say Marcus Smart, for example, wins Defensive Player of the Year, no argument there. But for what Taylor Jenkins is doing with such a young squad, with their improvement, with their consistency without a superstar team, and when their superstar isn't there, and the level that other guys are able to step up and work within that system, for me, Taylor Jenkins, Coach of the Year. Moving on to my All-NBA selections, I will work my way up from third to first. My All-NBA third team at centre, and I am going centre, 2 forwards and 2 guards, because that's how it's voted on. There are some players who were a combo of both. However, I'm just taking preference on the fact that if they're a centre forward or forward centre, I need a centre, okay, you're going into centre. If they're guard forward and they rank high enough, I can put them in the forward. That kind of thing, but I'm not going to just twist and shout because a guy's like, he's going to be X amount in the MVP or X amount in the statistical category, and you put him here. It's just a flat layout how it is, and that's likely how it's going to be voted on as well. All-NBA third team, I have Karl-Anthony Towns at the centre, I have Kevin Durant and Pascal Siakam as my forwards, and I have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland as my guards. Many people are going to ask where LeBron James is. He did average 36 and 8, but he didn't play enough games to qualify for the scoring title, and his team didn't even make the play-in. If you're not going to qualify for scoring leaderboards, or statistical leaderboards, your team plays so subpar, it's not funny. People are going to go, he didn't play many games, and neither did Durant. Well, that's fair enough, but I had Durant contributing to more wins. Their team's also in the play-in. The team's also above 500, and they're also going to be playing playoffs. A lot of other factors. And if you're going to differentiate 0.7 points per game as to your reasoning, fair enough, I get it. But I think you have to contribute to those factors as well. Siakam, another standout season. Many people are going to ask where Chris Paul is. Again, missed 8 weeks. Proved again that side is good and great without him. Again, led the league in assists. Massive tip of the cap. Essentially put up Steve Nash MVP numbers, but was the second option. Was proven that they could run without him. Has a lot of front running about the way he plays, Chris Paul. And the other one that's probably going to get a question as well is Rudy Gobert. Fair point. However, I don't think he was the third best centre in the league. I don't think he was in the top 3 centres in the league this year. To me, that's automatic there. I don't think he's the best defensive big man in the league anymore, even though there'll be a slight contradiction on that. I'll explain that when I get there. The fact he wasn't even the best player on his own team, another big factor there as well. But Mitchell and Garland, I think Garland certainly earned that right. I think Donovan Mitchell's earned that right. A lot of people sleep on his ability there. But again, when it's going to come down to the playoffs as well, I can rate Donovan Mitchell in the regular season more than I can Gobert. And I certainly can rate Donovan Mitchell more in the playoffs than I can Rudy Gobert. It doesn't count, and I get it. But you do have to factor in how these guys are performing and what we know we can get out of them as well. All-NBA second team to light a fire up everyone's backside. My centre is Joel Embiid. My forwards are Jason Tatum and DeMar DeRozan. My guards are Steph Curry and Ja Morant. Again, many people are going to go, how could you have, 2, 3, how could you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 out of 5 guys, or 3 out of 5 guys playing on top 3 seeds, 4 of them in the top 4, and everyone else making playoffs? Well, Embiid's a centre, Karl-Anthony Towns is a centre, Nikola Jokic is a centre. I've got Jokic as my MVP. He's a centre. He gets first team nod. I have Embiid as the second best centre in the league. Therefore, he goes into the second team. Reasonable logic to follow. Scoring champ, great. That's probably one of the big cruxes there. But being a scoring champ and being an MVP, vastly different situations. Jason Tatum, really, really close. But he was pipped by one guy, I do feel, on that one there as well. DeMar DeRozan, another guy, guard forward, could be classed as a forward and played predominantly forward there when you look at the way that team played. Steph Curry, Ja Morant, I don't think they're hard questions to answer. Many people are going to look at Ja's games, but again, I had him as one of the 10 responsible for 10, one of the 10 most, he was top 10 in wins responsible for, essentially the way I look at it. How well would you play in wins? I had him amongst the 10 best players in the league. He was one of 10 players to be responsible for 25 wins this year. Massive step up. Again, massive season. Steph Curry, okay, not his standard Steph year, but I still feel that he was responsible for a significant amount of wins despite missing time and not having a Steph year. Again, DeMar DeRozan was in MVP conversations. I mean, we're talking about 4 out of 5 guys here who were consistently in the MVP conversation this year. Very hard to deny them, that's for sure. My All-NBA first team at centre, Nikola Jokic, he was my MVP. Forward, Giannis Antetokounmpo. The other forward, Luka Doncic. Again, he was a guy who was a forward guard. I have him responsible for more wins than DeMar DeRozan or Jason Tatum. Process of elimination by subtraction. He also carried more with less, essentially, and won more games than the Celtics. So, a bit hard to deny those numbers there. Devin Booker and Trae Young. Now, many people are going to question Trae. Again, I had him responsible for more wins and he was healthier than Steph and Ja. He also led the league in total points and total assists and become the second guy to ever do it. Feather in the cap there. Now, is that team better? Obviously with Steph and with Ja and probably even a Chris Paul or Darius Garland, potentially. Depends if they get involved. But again, I don't think I can deny Trae Young's ability there this season. Do I like the way he plays the game? No. But do I have to respect what he's achieved, what he's pushed through? This is a guy who led essentially the 8th seed to the Eastern Conference Final last year. Without his second best player this year, has put 43 wins on the board, shouldered a massive offensive load. Devin Booker, again, another guy consistently in the MVP conversation. Giannis consistently in the MVP conversation, and the DPO White conversation. Could look pretty silly if he comes second in the scoring title, wins the Defensive Player of the Year. Well, he's probably the MVP at that point. He's the best two-way player in the league, but I've got Nikola Jokic as my MVP. Luka, again, shouldering a massive load, didn't play necessarily to the elite level on both ends, but I believe he was responsible for more wins. I think he carried more of a load. He didn't have the defenders behind him. He had trades go on during the season. His second best player was Jalen Brunson. Is anyone else doing what he did with Jalen Brunson? Good player, understandable, but seriously, I do think we need to weigh that in as a factor as well. So recapping my All-NBA third team, Karl-Anthony Towns, Kevin Durant, Pascal Siakam, Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. All-NBA second team, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, DeMar DeRozan, Steph Curry and Ja Morant. My All-NBA first team, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, Devin Booker and Trae Young. Finally, we'll go to the all-defensive teams. I will start with the all-defensive second team. This one's battling a pick, but I've seen some comparative lists around the place and I've been around 80 to 90% equal in comparison there. My all-defensive second team, Bam Adebayo, Robert Williams III, Mikal Bridges, Gary Trent Jr., Dejounte Murray. I just think that the numbers get Jr. over the top of Van Vliet, despite the fact Van Vliet was an all-star. However, you can still, cross and change that. The Detroit Pistons are a really good example. 4 all-stars. Their 5th all-star, realistically, was Tayshaun Prince, was an all-league defender. Massive season. Dejounte Murray led the league in steals, solid two-way play, massive defensive anchor there for the Spurs. Mikal Bridges, the best defender on the best team in the league. Jay Crowder was probably lucky not to get a nod as well. Chris Paul always makes a case. But healthy, big-time defender, key defensive anchor of the best team in the league. Got to show some respect there. Robert Williams, very limited games hurt him in comparison to some of these other guys. Only played the 60 games, I do believe it was, particularly through injury. 60 of 82 as the Celtics were 11-11 without him. But again, one of the overshadowings of Marcus Smart is the fact that people are talking about Robert Williams III as a potential DPOY candidate. Same with Mikal Bridges. So, a lot of questions to be asked there. But he had a really solid season. And Boston are going to be a very different side without him in it. I think it's going to show how crucial his defense is. Bam Adebayo, had to choose between him and another guy I'll mention in a second. But Bam with a really solid season. And again, got to pay respect to the team. Finished on top, their best defender and, a really elite defender as well. My all-defensive first team, it's going to be interesting here with how people react to this. Rudy Gobert, Jaren Jackson Jr., Giannis Antetokounmpo, Marcus Smart, and Matisse Thybulle. Walk-up start with the guards, in my opinion. Thybulle, terrific defender. He's going to be a key factor in not being able to play games in Toronto in the playoffs. Marcus Smart, again, potential DPOY candidate, would probably be the guy that I pick over Jaren Jackson Jr. if I had to make another selection. Giannis Antetokounmpo, anchored the defensive end for the Bucks to 51 wins, essentially by himself defensively. Drew Holiday had his moments, but he's not the same Drew Holiday as before. And again, I'd like to give credit to the Holiday in saying that he's going to probably step up towards the back end of the season here. But Giannis, massive anchor there, and you've got to consider that he's doing all of this while he's doing all the work he does offensively as well. Jaren Jackson Jr., again, DPOY. I personally can't have my DPOY, not the first team. And Rudy Gobert. Now, a lot of people are going to say, you've just said he's not the best defensive big in the league. Correct. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a better defensive big. The people get stuck on the idea of big being, oh, well, he plays centre. Well, you could argue the best big in the league for a long time was Hakeem Olajuwon. He played centre, but he moved like a power forward. Okay, well, Tim Duncan was arguably the most consistent big in the league. Yeah, but here's a power forward who played centre. You can't make the cake and eat it too. You need to, try and make a decision here. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has a genuine case as the best defensive big in the league. Giannis Antetokounmpo has a genuine case as the best defensive big in the league, as does Bam Adebayo, as does Robert Williams III. This isn't clear-cut anymore. And again, when you want to look at raw numbers and when you want to look at what was produced by Memphis, I think it's clear that Jaren Jackson Jr. is a better defensive big right now than Rudy Gobert. But do I think that he was the best defensive centre and pure centre out of all of this? Yeah, I do. I think he was a better defensive centre. But again, your questions do need to be raised when you look at how he performs in the playoffs. Again, it's regular season, and I do have to give it credit. But Utah also didn't win 50 games this year. And that is a side that would normally win 50 games, especially consistently over the last few years. So for me, does get that first centre nod, that first defensive team centre. Will it be like that next year? Who knows? I do sense there is a slide, and this could be the last time we see it. He's already got 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. People don't like it when I'm going to say it. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. You don't win 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards and don't make the Hall of Fame. First ballot might be a bit of a stretch. I do take that back a bit, but he is likely to be a Hall of Famer at some point. And somewhat ahead of Donovan Mitchell at this point, which is crazy to think. But my all-defensive selections this year, second team, Bam Adebayo, Robert Williams III, Kyle Bridges, Gary Trent Jr., Deontay Murray. And my all-defensive first team, Rudy Gobert, Jaren Jackson Jr., Giannis Antetokounmpo, Marcus Smart, and Matisse Thybulle. That is my wrap at the end of the season on the 2021-2022 NBA regular season. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. Hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, give me some feedback on what you think. Who were your All-NBA selections? Who were your All-Defensive selections? Who were your regular season awards? Who performed for your team? Who underperformed for your team? Who exceeded expectations team-wise? Who underperformed team-wise? How you seen the playoffs shaping up? Everything like that. Keen to hear your feedback. Provide that at the bottom of the video there in the comments section. You can provide it on my Facebook page, JB's NBA. I'm looking to want to really revamp that starting next season. It's been an absolutely hectic 6 months as far as work and alike. You can also follow me on Twitter, Justin_G_Bryan, where I'm always talking hoops. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.